All right, so welcome everybody. We're getting started for this presentation on what is all this about. Everybody wants to know about pollinators. So I want to tell you why people are planting these pollination preservation gardens. And or you have to introduce me first.
Yeah.
Okay, so go.
Sorry. Okay. Hi, my name is Andrew Grossman. I'm the district administrator, Middlesex Conservation District. Today we are here for Giancarla Kalpas, who is going to be speaking about why and how to build a pollination preservation garden. We are a conservation district. It's state quasi government. There are several in Massachusetts. We promote soil and water conservation. We have some future workshops coming up. Dr. Ambarish Kamalkar is going to be talking about ecological, hydrological, and cultural impacts from climate change in the Northeast on April 13th. And at the First Parish Church in Westford. And then in May, I think it's May 18th, we're going to have a foraging on the farm workshop on Clark Farm in Carlisle. That'll be at 10 in the morning. So if you want to register, it's up on our website. We look forward for you. We look forward for you guys to have a good time today. Today we have Giancarla Kalpas, who is going to be our speaker for the presentation today. She's from the Bumblebee Project, and she can introduce herself.
Hello, everybody again. So why are we planting the pollination preservation gardens? I hope by the time all right, so first of all, a disclaimer. I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert. I'm just a normal person that becomes very excited about helping, wherever I can help. So to give you an example of what I've done in my life, I found out in the 80s, so that was like 30, 40 years ago, that the bluebirds had become very rare in this area. People were telling me, you're crazy, there are no bluebirds here, why do you put up birdhouses? Well, put up birdhouses, it took a while for them to find them, but in 1992, a pair came to nest in my front yard, and they had the first, they fledged their babies. And so, well, one nest is not enough, right? So I saw that there were people putting up birdhouses in other properties, and I volunteered to monitor them. And then I bought more houses. I put up more houses. At this point, don't tell my husband, there's about more than 100 boxes in South Chelmsford. And I don't know if you can see the number, but I hope this year, with the babies that will fledge, this year I will pass 3,000 babies. So when I said, well, that's good, right? But then, about 4 years ago, I found out that there are other problems in nature, and that is a decline of plants, a decline of animals and pollinators. And so there were some successes there too. So when I found out what needed to be done, I did it, and they came. Let's see. So where did I get this information? Remember, in 2020, something very sad happened. We were all shut down. We were not going to meetings in person. Everything was canceled. But for me, it was an awesome opportunity to attend a lot of online Zoom meetings, webinars. And so the Bumblebee Project, it had a different name then, but that is a current name, is a group that is sponsored by the Sudbury Valley Trustees, which is a regional land trust that covers the 36 towns in the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord River watershed. And so there, the purpose of the Bumblebee Project is to restore and conserve the habitat for species of pollinators that are going extinct. They're on the brink. Some have already, they are not found anymore in Massachusetts. I will tell you more of the details. And so to promote this mission, we hope that every town in the watershed will plant a native pollination preservation garden in a public place where it will be the opportunity for anybody to go and visit, and it will be an opportunity, first of all, to host and feed the pollinators, but also to spread the information. So the person, there is a doctor, a scientist who's doing this research, who collects the data on which plants are these pollinators that are going extinct, which plants do they go for the food that they need. And his name is Dr. Robert Giancarla. He very kindly shared with me some of his slides. So we have a picture here of a meadow with many visitors. What are all these animals coming to the meadow for? Well, the bees, for instance, come for pollen and nectar. They eat the nectar themselves, the pollen, they feed it to their young ones. The butterflies, they come for the nectar for themselves, for the adults. But they also need to find plants that are appropriate for their caterpillars. Their caterpillars are very picky eaters. They will only need the plants that they have been eaten, their ancestors over the eons. So if they don't find the right plant that the mother knows the babies will eat, she will not be able to lay her eggs. So that means next year there will not be those butterflies. And of course, the hummingbird comes for the nectar. So the plants offer all this food to these animals. Well, what do the plants get in return for what they contribute? Well, this is about sex for plants. Plants have male and female parts, but they cannot move around and find each other. They need a matchmaker. And the matchmaker is the pollinator. So let's take a bumblebee, which goes collecting pollen from flower to flower to feed to her babies. Well, as she goes from flower A to flower B, if it is the same species, then the pollen is transferred to the female part. And if that contributes to the formation of seeds and fruit, then the bumblebee becomes a pollinator. But pollination does not always happen. For instance, if the pollen you see from the blue lobelia flower, if the pollen is transferred from one flower to the other flower on the same plant, that is incompatible. It will not produce a seed. So in the blue lobelia, it has to be transferred to a different plant, but of the same species, and then we might get seeds. Another case when pollination will not happen, if the bee goes from the lobelia to the white meadowsweet, that is a loss of pollen for the lobelia, and it is a lost opportunity for the meadowsweet to be pollinated because her stigma is going to be full of the wrong pollen. So those animals that we saw in the meadow earlier, each of them don't go to all the different flowers. They have their favorite ones, the ones like we said before that they have co-evolved. So there are many diverse pollination systems. A system is a plant and all the animals that come to pollinate it. So here we have, for instance, the bumblebee on the prunella, the hummingbird on the long tube flowers. We have a fly on this white flower with that long tube, and of course, the fly has a long tongue. And here, excuse me, I need to drink maybe first. We have the butterfly. The butterfly does not look for the pollen for itself, but as it goes around collecting the nectar, you see in the picture, there are the grains of the pollen sticking to her body, and that is how the butterfly can also be a pollinator. So why is pollination so important? Because if you look at that food web, the pollination systems are at the bottom. We have the plants that get the energy from the sun, And if they are pollinated, they will produce the flowers, produce the seeds and fruit. And from there, we get, of course, more plants. But the seed and the fruit are going to feed the birds, the mouse, the rabbit. And then the predator, bigger animals will eat the smaller animal. And that way up to the food chain. If we were to lose more and more, and we started to lose already some of these connections, the more we could reach the point where this food web will be like a house of cards. And that is not going to be a good outcome. The other interesting idea that I learned from Dr. Gigia is that, yes, there is a decline in the diversity of plants, and there is a decline in the diversity of bees and butterflies, but not all the bumblebees are in decline. If you can see in this chart, the bar chart, Bumble's impatience has increased tremendously in the number of their population. That is, in fact, it's called the common bumblebee, because most likely if you see a bumblebee on a flower, it's a Bombus impatiens. On the other hand, Bombus fervidus and Bombus vagans, I'm sorry if I say the Latin names, but that comes easier to me in this case, those have become very rare. And same thing, I cannot explain the butterfly chart, it's too complicated, but you can see that there's one section that there some species are in decrease and some instead have increased. So what is causing this? Why aren't they all decreasing, for instance? There must be some reason. So what do the pollinators need? They need pollen and nectar. So they need to have pollen. The first, it's already blooming. The pussy willow, if you have a pussy willow, you saw that they're already starting to open up their little fuzzy flower. That is the first, if it is a male plant, because pollens have male and female plants. They have the male and female flowers on separate bushes. In a male willow, you will have pollen, and that is the first source of pollen in the season. Very important to have it. As soon as the queen bumblebee emerges from hibernation, we'll be looking for that pollen. And then as a willow fade, you will have other plants like the Carolina and Virginia rose, the flowering raspberry, the meadowsweet, and more or less, you will need more than those, but that is just an example of having the flowers providing the pollen throughout the season, at least when the bees are looking for the pollen. And then for nectar sources, we have the early flowers, so wood betony, pensimon, monarda, and all the way through the jewel bee. Like I mentioned before, butterflies, it's very important to have host plants. And these plants are included also in the list that we are using to select the plants for our gardens. These are butterflies and skippers that are in danger, and these are flowers that plant, not all flowers, there are some grasses too that we are helping them. So it's pretty known at this point what the host plants are for butterflies. The research is still being done, and we can help in that research. Is what plants do they go to for the nectar? Are they long tube flowers? Are they short tube? What family of flowers are they? So we can become citizen scientists and collect the information. We see a butterfly on a flower, we can take a short video and submit it to the Beecology app, and there you will be guided to identifying the butterflies, the plant it is on. That information goes to Dr. Gigia, and he will, so we're helping science. So here is a list that absolutely you need to print this list, go shopping with that list in your hand when you go to a garden store, because you have to be smarter than they are. They will try to sell you plants that they're not native, they're not straight species. So you have to be really on your toes. I've been tricked many times. So after the information, the data has been collected, people have planted these gardens. We have the example in the Dartmouth area where Dr. Jigia transformed that agricultural meadow into a garden that contains his plants. And here is the picture from Southborough, that this is a garden that my friend Freddie planted with her volunteers. And of course, it's not so bare like it looks in the picture right now. This is when they just started to plant, and now it's green and lush. So this is not the experience of the other people. It is my own experience. A year after planting the garden, those 2 species of bumblebees that are at risk showed up. I just couldn't believe it when I first saw that Bombus fervidus on the looping. You will see the video that I took that time. So here they are on different flowers. There is a showy goldenrod. There is a pensimon, hirsutus. The other one is a St. John's wort. If you plant the right plants, you will succeed. Oops. All right. So beside planting the right plants, we also need to have a specific way of gardening. I know many of us grow up with the idea that everything needs to be tidy, every little twig and every leaf has to be raked and cleaned up. Don't. Because we need to provide the wintering. The bumblebee, the queen bumblebee needs to find a place to spend the winter. It could be in a log, in a dead tree that is lying on the ground, in a pile of wood that you prepared. And especially you need to leave the leaves, because the queen makes a shallow burrow, a shallow hole in the ground. She has to be able to burrow in the ground, so the ground has to be soft. So if you leave the leaves, you have decomposing material, the ground is very soft, they'll be able to go and hibernate. And especially these days, these recent winters, when we don't get enough snow for insulation, a good layer of leaves provide insulation for that queen to survive the winter. You see here from the picture, there are also butterflies that would use this kind of habitat. The mourning cloak spends the winter as an adult. The viceroy over here, the one, it almost looks like a monarch, but there's a purpose for that, but it's a defensive mechanism. So anyway, the viceroy is overwinters as a caterpillar, and of course he's also looking for a safe place to survive. Other of these insects overwinter as a chrysalis or a pupa, or they burrow inside stems. So we need to keep that habitat. We were talking about the food web. Here you have the example of a shrubby St. John's wort, which is visited, I believe, I'm not sure if that is fervidus or vagans, but one of the two at risk. And of course, it was pollinated because the plant grew seeds, and the seeds were eaten by the white-throated sparrow, I believe. And so we see how the food web is working, how it really happens. So these are this poster shows the bumblebees from Massachusetts. Those that are in the red boxes either are gone or on the way to be gone. So extinction is forever. Have you seen a dodo bird or a what is that, pigeon? I haven't seen any of those. Passenger pigeon. Thank you. So extinction, when they're gone, they're gone. So we need to try to do everything we can to preserve that biodiversity that we're still lucky to have. Okay. So we were talking about, excuse me. Why are some species of bumblebee in decline and others not? And that has to do in part to the difference in their anatomy. Some have short tongues, some have medium tongues, and some have long tongues. So when I was preparing a presentation, I said, how can I give them a visual to remember that? And I remember this fable that I used to read, one of the fables that I used to read to my children. And that is a story of the fox and the stork. So the fox, well, she pretended to be a good neighbor, invited the stork for lunch and prepared a delicious soup, nice and hot and flavorful, and served it in a very shallow bowl. While the fox is like a dog, can lap up easily. But the stork could not eat it with a long beak. The stork went home hungry. Well, the stork got her revenge. She said, oh, dear fox, come back tomorrow for dinner. She prepared a delicious stew, but served it in that long neck vessel. Well, this time, the stork could eat, and the fox went home hungry. So the moral of the fable has nothing to do with the topic that we're covering, but it's just to remind you about the different characteristics of the body of these insects. Okay, so this is the reason why we need to plant these plants. Now I'm going to present how we did it at the Sunny Meadow Farm in Champson. So I decided that I was going to become an ambassador for the Bumblebee Project. And there are two aspects of being an ambassador. One is to plant the gardens. And I said, oh, I can plant a garden. I've grown flowers, in my yard for 45 years. But the other one was to educate and teach. And I said, well, I don't know, I'm too shy. I don't know if I can do that. So here I am. So I needed to find a place where to plant a garden. And I was very familiar with the farm. It's a town-owned property. And I have bluebird houses there, so I knew it quite well. And I have a plot in the community garden. So I asked the person who is in charge of the farm if I could have, there were some plots of land that had been used for annuals and other flowers, and it had been kind of abandoned during the COVID time. So I said, well, can I have that? And he said, yes. So the work started. So this is well, this is only part of it now because we have been expanding and we are still expanding more. So we had to choose a location and they agreed to give me that plot. I had to order the plants and I went on the website of the Bumblebee Project where they have all the data. They have the plant list. They have the stores where you can go to buy the plants. They even offered me a grant to pay for the initial purchase of the plants. And then people came to help to prepare and to plant. So here we have what it looked like before we started. And then some soil was brought in, and then just the volunteers, they were just falling down from the sky. They were also willing to come and help strangers, people I did not know. They were just coming to help. So planting day arrived. My car was full of plants. I had ordered most of them from the Lincoln Land Trust that had a great plant sale of these plants from Dr. Jagiers. And that day, people that I did not know, we had just advertised on the local Facebook group. We planted by the number. I had put flags with the number, and there was a number on the pot. So people planted by the number. It was very easy. In a few hours, everything was put in. And one of the volunteers who came with his big toys, he brought his digger to help us make, the larger holes for the shrubs. And then it kept expanding. We added another section. This was during the summer of that same year. There was a group of volunteers. These were students, teenagers from a local church. They came, they helped us spread the mulch, they helped us put up the fence. And this is my favorite picture, the one of the young women there. We gave them a power tool and they were so happy. They felt so empowered. They were trusted, with the cordless drill. So the first season, not all of them, but most of the plants bloomed. So I collected the seeds because I knew I was going to ask for some more plots there. So I knew I needed more plants. So I collected the seeds and cleaned them, put them in packets. And also there was in a lot of seeds that I was able to share with people. And you see on the right side, there are milk crates. They're full of jugs, milk jugs and water jugs. And those are the mini greenhouses that we use for the winter sow method. You plant because the native plants are co-evolved with the New England weather. They need to go through the winter time, the wet and the cold, the freezing, the thawing, to unlock their germination process. And so, look how many plants I got. It was a lot of work because once you take them out of the jug, you have to separate them, put them in each, not individually, sometimes just you put clumps. Oh yeah. I think I grew thousands of plants from seeds. Well, this was, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say the question again? You asked me, okay, so the question was if these are all plants that I grew. Yes. Yes, I collected the seeds. I planted them in the winter time in those jugs. There's you have to cut them in half. You make like a little greenhouse. It's a miniature greenhouse. You drill holes, put the soil, you sprinkle some seeds, and then you put them outside in the cold, in the snow, in the rain, whatever happens in the weather, because they need that. And then when they germinate, after they get a little bit bigger, they have a couple of sets of true leaves. Then you take them out of the jug, you separate them, and either you plant them if you have a place already for planting, or you put them in jugs, and then later you plant. And you had another question? Okay. And then, like I said, I never have enough. There were some other plot that looked full of weeds and abandoned. And so I asked, so Phil is a person in charge of the volunteers at the farm. I said, well, can I have that? And he said, sure. He never says no. So here you see, that summer, there was this group they were in a summer camp and they were doing some service time. So they came that day to help put up another fence. We put up fences here because we have rabbits and deer, and especially when the plants are young, I don't want to lose them all. So, and I think the deer can jump in. I've seen sign of their nibbling, but at least they're not devastating the whole garden. And this fellow in the middle, he's my gate maker. When now it's almost a joke with us every time he sees you need a gate. He already built a couple of gates for us. And on the right side, in that picture, I was starting to plant those plants that I had grown from seeds. And we keep going, we are expanding. And people are volunteering. This young man helped to rototill, and we have, it was amazing. This fellow with the blue shirt, I bumped into him just a week or two before that day. And I was struggling moving some things to my vegetable garden. He offered to help. And then he said, if you need help with other things, just let me know. That's okay. Well, maybe next year we can put up a fence for the next garden. And I said, well, how about I ask him now? And he said, yes. He said, okay, I'll come Saturday, 8 o'clock. Well, he came with 2 friends. In 2 hours, they put up the next fence. So, it's amazing how people, so if you want to plant a garden, don't think you have to do it all by yourself. Just, get people to, they will want to help you. So, okay, next. As I said, the other branch of being an ambassador is to spread the information and educate. So the first opportunity was when the second graders from a school that is within walking distance, they asked if they could come and visit the farm and if I could also show them the garden. So of course I said yes. And they were so interested and so attentive. And I learned later that one of the boys, I met his mother at the gym. She said, "Are you the one of the pollinator garden?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "You know, my son wants a pollinator garden at home. He wants to go to Weston all the time to buy plants." So I said, "Yeah, it's working." Then the Boy Scouts, they wanted to know about native plants. So I said, "Sure." And they say no. And so after the talk, they all followed me. We went to the spot and they helped me plant the plants. And the nice story here is that later in the same year, I was planting the next garden, and the young family came around, the mother with a couple of children, and the little boy said, "Mom, that is a plant I planted." And he was looking, is there a caterpillar? Is there, so we are planting the seed in the minds and hearts of the young people because we're doing it for us and we're doing it for them. And then guess what? They asked me to be interviewed by the telemedia in Chelmsford. There was a summer camp and these students were practicing, doing television and interviewing. So of course they asked me questions about the pollinators and what is pollination. And so I went, you can find the video on YouTube. And then what happened? So here we have, sorry, it's not changing. I'm pushing. Okay, it was a little hesitant.
Did it skip anything?
No, that was the right one.
Okay.
So native plants are beautiful. And these are just some examples of the flowers that were, and there is always something blooming because it's planned that way to always have more than one species in bloom throughout the summertime. And look, this was just a year after planting. And the penstemon is all full of flowers. There is a cardinal flowers. There is rose milkweed. The plants want to do their thing. They want to grow. Then somebody offered us a trellis. And I said, "Where am I going to put the trellis? The gardens are full." Well, Phil said, "Put it outside on the fence." So again, the volunteers, they went to pick it up from the house of where the donation was coming from. They disassembled it, they brought it over, they reassembled it. And then this winter, they had to rebuild it because when we had that strong wind, it collapsed. So right now, it looks slightly different because they had to reinforce it. And around the trellis, I planted the Lonicera sempervirens, the native honeysuckle vine, which is a favorite of the hummingbirds. And that is another opportunity for teaching this idea that, yes, we love to put our hummingbird feeders. And I used to put out like half a dozen in my yard. But then I learned that it is much better to plant the native plants because if you do that, you're feeding not only the hummingbirds, but you're feeding also those, say, moths or other critters that use that plant as a host plant. And then you have the seeds that are eaten by some other animal. So it's much better to put out the plants and for the hummingbirds than the feeders. So we built a trellis. Then I found out that beach plum was a new addition to the list on Dr. Gigia's plant list. So I needed to have beach plum. The town was willing to pay for it, or at least the garden group. And so we put in the beach plums. Well, the beach plums have not bloomed yet, but you see right here, these are screenshots from videos that I took. There's Bombus vagans on the meadowsweet, and there's Bombus fervidus on the woodbutton. They're coming, so we need to plant the right plants. Did I tell you we are expanding? Okay, let me drink some more water. There was a shade garden that somebody had grown using non-natives. And then they left and it became abandoned and it was just a mess of invasives. There was, you can name bittersweet, et cetera. And all the non-native plants that this fellow had put in. So Phil was asking me, do you want to take over the shade garden? I said, well, only if I can put natives. And he said, yes. So we cleaned it up again. There was a dozen adult volunteers. They came and that Saturday morning, they pulled out all the weeds, all the invasives. The place, I still call it jokingly the rock garden because it's full of stuff. There's still a lot of boulders and rocks, but it's a shady rock garden. So these are plants that do well in partial shade or full shade. We started planting it in the fall and we will finish it this year. So this is an example of some of the flowers. Now let's see if I can show the video. The sisal. And okay, now first you see this is a wild bergamot. You see the butterfly, and there are all kinds of bees in there. And the other one is the sisal. So it's just such a joy, such a pleasure to walk around and see that it's alive. So it's very encouraging to know that it works. This is a picture, the lupin flower. That is when I first saw that first time the Bombus fervidus. I was either crying or laughing, I'm not sure, but I just couldn't believe it that they were there. They were, I mean, just that one there. That was 2022, the first year that the plant bloomed. And the next one is vegans on the showy goldenrod. And by the way, some of these plants that you see here were offered as seeds in the seed sale of the district. Not the lupin, but the showy goldenrod. Okay, I'm not the only one who was successful. There were people before me that had these good results. So you see at the Southborough Library, again, the planting by the number with the flags. They were just doing the installation that day. And then at Breakneck Hill, you see the beautiful site with the blue and white lobelia and then the cardinal flower further back. You have the school in Lincoln where same thing, they planted these plants, and then our garden in Chelmsford. Okay, now, so far we talked about the garden, the public display pollination preservation. Not all of us have access to a place like that, a town-owned property, but we all have a flower pot, a window box, a small yard, a big yard, whatever you have, you can do something to help. So you see the picture, not crazy about large lawns. Why? First of all, the grass that we grow in our lawns, they're not native. They require a lot of resources to make it look good. You need to water it. You need to fertilize it. You need to pesticize it. Herbicide, whatever, all the chemicals that you have to put in, which then wash down from your lawn into the waterways, causing big problems. You're making the noise with the lawnmowers, with the leaf blowers. You're using, the fuel. So it's not a good idea. So the suggestion is shrink your lawn if you can, unless you have children that need a soccer field. But you can shrink your lawn and increase your flower beds, putting the right flowers. And like I said before, you need to have the continued supply of, reduce your lawn. Why can't I make it turn? Sometimes it has to think about it. I don't know. Yes. You need to have, you need to have Andrea's, okay, it's sometimes, it needed to rest, maybe it's old like me. Okay, so another big idea when we look at our gardens, like we said before, don't make it pristine, don't make it the way, some magazines make you think your garden has to be. We need to keep the stems. So what I do in my own home garden, what I do at the garden at Sunny Meadow Farm, I don't cut anything. I let the bird eat the seeds. You don't need to put bird feeders or bird seed, in the wintertime. I see in my yard jonquils and goldfinches all winter long eating the seeds on the plants. Then later in the spring, when it gets warm, and you see bumblebees flying around, it means they have come out of hibernation. Then it's okay to cut, but don't cut all the way to the ground. What I do, I use my body to measure. I read someplace a number, but I figure it is about to my knee. So that length of stem, leave it on the plant, because that can be used as a nesting site or as an overwintering site. There are all kinds of bees, some very, very small that can go even inside small stems. So leave the leaves, we talked about that before, and leave the stems. So be lazy. Lazy is a new, messy is a new beautiful. Okay, I get into arguments with people. Sometimes I'm in the garden there at the farm and people walk by and they see the showy goldenrod in full bloom and they said, oh, no, I'm allergic to goldenrod. And I said, it's not true, it's impossible. The reason it's impossible because goldenrod has a pollen that is heavy and sticky. It doesn't fly around in the wind. It has to be moved by the animal from flower to flower. So the real culprit, the reason of your seasonal allergies is the ragweed, which has a flower that you don't even notice. So you don't know that it's there blooming. And the pollen of the ragweed is very, very light and blows in the wind. Forgot to mention earlier that some plants are pollinated by wind, and this is one of them. Some plants are pollinated by water. The water carries the seed of the plants, but the vast majority is pollinated by the animals. So goldenrod is okay. Put goldenrod, especially the showy goldenrod. It's very beneficial. Okay, where do we go buying these plants? First of all, alert. No matter where you go, even if there is native in their name, just don't trust them right away. Make sure you do your homework, make sure you do your research if is that really native. Listen, every plant is native someplace. You have a plant in Florida, it's native, right? But then if you carry the plant from Florida to Massachusetts, the label still says native. Okay, so you have to know what you want and what you're buying. How do you find out if a plant is native? Well, first of all, how do you know what plant you have? Suppose you move to another house, move or wherever you are, you find the plant, you don't know what it is. So I'm sure some of you know there are apps that will help you to identify what is in front of you. And then once you have the name, then you can go on a website called Go Botany, where you can find out where the plant is native. For instance, I'll give you an example. I bought a couple of hydrangeas from the Native Plant Trust. They're not native to this area. They didn't tell me that, but I trusted them that because it used to be called New England Flower Society, but now they're native. So those plants are not native. And one of them is a cultivar. So we didn't touch on cultivars. Cultivar it has been proven by research. Cultivars are not as good as a straight species. The cultivar is derived from a natural plant, but it has been, selected and manipulated to make it look better to us. So you want to plant something that just makes you happy, or you want to plant a plant that makes the whole ecosystem? So any questions about where to buy plants? Yes? Okay. Okay, so the question, how do you know if a plant you're buying is a straight species or a cultivar? It's very easy. The neonics is something else, but for two things, right? Okay, the first question is about how do you know if a species is a straight species or a cultivar? When you buy a plant, I went to a garden where somebody told me, I bought this plant and they guaranteed it's native. Okay, so it says Cornus florida, that is a dogwood. And then in quotation, Cherokee princess. If after the Latin names, the two words of the Latin name, you have something in quotation, that is a cultivar. It's a named cultivar. It's not a true native. You might have Monarda didima, say bibar, and then it says red lips. It's a cultivar. It's not, but if it only says Monarda didima with nothing after that, then it is straight. Means it was. It means that it was not manipulated to create a special effect, like a different color, a double flower. What happens when they make those changes? The plant may not even be fertile. Maybe a sterile plant doesn't have any pollen. So it doesn't do any good to the eco. Not all plants are like that, but there are some. So yes, and the neonics is short for neonicotinoids. Many of the plants that are sold in garden centers, Lowe's, Home Depot, special, those big stores, the plants have been treated with a pesticides that stays in the plant, and even after a long time can poison and kill the animal that comes to feed on the plant. So you need to ask the question, is your plant neonicotinoids or neonic free? Yes. Asclepias? Yes, Asclepias. So, yes. Well, so Asclepias, so the question is about the Asclepias plants. Those are the milkweeds, correct? So there is the rose milkweed, the common milkweed, different kinds of milkweed. But if it has those names, where a different color, a different, different changes, it's not as good as a straight species. So the recommendation is to acquire only straight species. I know. Yes. I know, because now, so yeah, it's true. So the comment is yes, the stores know that we're looking for certain plants to help the ecosystem. And they want to sell plants because they make money, but they don't tell us the whole truth. So the best thing to do is to buy native plants that don't have the quotation after the scientific name. Yes, question. Comment. Oops, sorry, changing.
There are a lot of non-milkweeds being sold. They're not. So you have to know there's many varieties of milkweed.
Yeah, so the comment is that there are also some milkweed varieties that are not native. For instance, there is one that native, it's like tropical milkweed, and that is also not good enough. They have to be, plants that were here before the Europeans came. That is the definition of native. And not being manipulated or, selected for certain kind. No? Oh, okay. So how do you find the native plants? You have to go in the woods. No, that is not the right answer.
Specifically. No.
That's a wrong answer because you're not supposed to take plants from the wild because you're stealing. And to collect seeds, even to collect seeds, you need to have the permission of the landowner. Otherwise, you're stealing.
The seed pod from the milkweed.
That would be okay. The common milkweed, I give you permission to steal a seed pod. But you know, there are so many. I'm on Facebook a lot because I want different organizations, different people, and I get all these things about save the monarch, you know, gardening for the monarchs. But when I look, it's tropical milkweed native to Florida. Don't buy that. There's plenty of native milkweeds to please the monarch butterflies.
Yeah. I'm interested.
Okay,
You know, I keep seeing.
There are- I had the list. Now, I'm afraid, okay, so I don't know. I already skipped the slide, but you go on the Dr. Gigia's, you need to, if you Google Dr. Gigia's plant list, you'll find that list. And then it shows you when this flower is blooming. So you want to have flowers in March, in April, in May, in June for pollen and for nectar. So you make your plan. Then where to find them. There was also a list there of native nurseries. There are a lot of women-owned businesses that do this at home. They have a little, you know, home business where they grow plants from seeds. Yes, true straight species. And we will share. I think Andrea, following the presentation, I mean the next week, right? We'll send you all a link with information of what is the plant list to choose from and where to buy the plants.
I have a list of like plant finders.
Yes, in the SVT, in the page of the Bumblebee Project, there is a list of where to buy the plants. When I planted my garden, I had to drive like an hour in all directions to get the complete set that I wanted to have for the coverage, you know, for the whole season. There's a question in the back? Yes, the question is about the native plant trust. Yes, the plants are mostly native to New England, but you have to be careful. I bought the two different species. I bought hydrangea arborescens and hydrangea quercifolia, the oak leaf. They're not native. So yeah, they're beautiful plants. But again, if you want something beautiful to look at that only pleases you, put up a statue. Put up. You're kidding me. I've seen people that have a pot with plastic flowers. Well, put up plastic flowers. That is the same good that you do to the pollinators. Makes you happy. You look at something pretty. Yes. No, okay. It's a difference. So the two concepts of native and cultivar. So native is a plant that was here before the Europeans came. And then the plant industry has manipulated those plants in a way to make them more appealing to us. Maybe you don't like a plant that is 8 foot tall, they'll make you one that's 4 foot tall. It's still native, but now it's a cultivar. So it's not a straight species, true to the way it used to be. And so maybe now the chemistry is different. Maybe it's not as rich in pollen or nectar. Yes.
And some of the cultivars also need to be more disease resistant or more able to survive for various disease reasons, and that might be acceptable for.
So the question is, some of the cultivars are more disease resistant? Well, I don't know about that. I don't know that, but what could happen that the chemistry in the leaf, maybe it's not pleasant to the monarch or to the other butterfly that comes to eat it. So I don't know. I don't know about the disease. Freddie shakes her head. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about that. What did we have in that picture?
Bonap.org, bonap.org is the site to see if species are native to this area.
Yes, but Bonap is not as focused in more detail. If you go to Go Botany, it's more detailed. It shows you the state of Massachusetts, the other New England states, and it shows in purple if it is not native, or in green if it is native by counties. Yeah, that is my recommendation, to check if a plant is native. Oh, how do I go back to that? Okay, so here I need to thank so many people. All the people from the Chelmsford Land Trust, they gave me the initial grant that paid for the first load of plants and for the fence. And then the Chelmsford Open Space Stewards, they are always there to help me. All the scout troops, the church groups, town residents that have contributed material and time. And we couldn't even, we just said, well, it must have been over 200 people who over the last, since 2021, came to help. Here we have pictures of showy goldenrod, which were on the seed sale. We have on the top picture on the right, this is a rose milkweed with the monarch caterpillar. I had just, so this was one of the plants I had grown from seeds through the winter, planted it in the spring. In the summer, I saw caterpillars in it. And in the bottom, we have the purple giant hyssop, which is also a big attractant of the pollinators. So thank you, Middlesex Conservation District, for giving me this opportunity to present, and for selling seeds in Dr. Jigia's list. And maybe next year we will have even more of his seeds or plants. Some people have shared their photographs with me. And then especially, I tell you, Dr. Jigia is my hero because he has done and continues to do the research. I trust what he says, that, you know, if I follow his recommendations, I'm going to be successful. My friend Freddie here, who came here today, she has been my mentor from the beginning. She's become my friend, and she's still holding my hand to move me along. And my husband, you know, the poor guy has to be so patient with me. I think he's earning his halo. He's becoming a saint, thanks to all my activities. And to end, some words from Dr. Talamy about what the challenge that we have, and the hope that we can recover from the problems. I think this is, okay, question? Yes. Okay, so the question is, the native plants are growing, they're expanding. Some of them are growing like they send shoots, new shoots. Some of them don't do that, but they just self-seeds. So guess what? We're putting in a new garden. So the Boy Scout, one of the Boy Scouts proposed to build a native nursery where we will either transplant from the existing plots or put in from the winter sow, whichever way, you know, we get these plants. But your question is for those that we already have in the ground. We're planning to transplant them, move them there in the nursery, and then we will give them for free to nonprofit groups in town. Senior center, you know, if you're Hard Pond Association, you know, Chelmsford Land Trust is putting in a pollination garden. Churches, if they want to put in, you know, those plants will be made available to the community. Another question? Yes. There are plants that like sandy soil. For instance, the lupin. Lupin like sandy soil. And you know what the sandy soil is good for? For nesting bees. There are bees, not the bumblebees, I believe. There are some other native bees that you know, they make little tunnels in the sand. They put their egg, they put a little ball of provision. They provision it with the pollen, they close it up, and then, you know, the young one will come out. So sandy soil is good. Lavender is not native. Sorry, Joyce. No. Lavender is not native. See, you need to look it up. Every plant, you have to look it up. Don't assume that because you had it there for a long time, it's native. Yes, pollen. Yes, so I wish I could bring up that list, but so the list is very useful because it shows the name of the plant. It tells you what type of soil and what type of exposure, sunny, partial, or shade. It shows wet, medium, and dry. Then it shows you when it's blooming. And then on the left side, it shows you, does it help which bees? And so you have the bumblebees that we have worried about, you have other bees, you have butterflies, and then the list goes on. It gives you the host plants for the various butterfly species at risk. So it's a very complete, it's complete for this information that he has collected so far. 20,000, you know, data that he has collected, observations. You want to come up? You ready? So I'm going to call a question online.
Ask, do you have a planting design plans for your gardens that you can share, i.e. what you planted according to the flags?
Okay, okay, so do I have a garden design for the garden that I planted? I tell you, I'm a terrible garden designer. You know what I do? I put squares, straight lines. This square meter is for Asclepias tuberosa. This square meter is for obedient plant. I give them square meters. But if you're good at designing, you can make wandering paths. But for the gardens here at the farm, I just went straight. So I don't really, I mean, I have a design, I made it up. I took a graph paper and I made straight lines and I gave each block to a different species. So I put a shorter one in front. So I guess when you come, you can see those more easily, and the taller ones in the back. I try to mix the colors so I wouldn't have all the yellows here. And I also try to mix when they're blooming. So there is blooming a little bit everywhere around. Yeah, I'm not good at design. I'm sure some of you are good at that. Question? Only 3 plants. The problem is that, okay, so the question is, what are my top 3 favorite plants that will help bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds? That question is impossible to answer because you need to have, if you want to have bees, you need to have flowers blooming from April to October. For the butterflies, you need to have flowers blooming when they are around flying because they need the nectar, and you need to have the host plants for those babies that are so picky eaters. For the hummingbirds, I have a few suggestions that I have myself. So the native honeysuckle vine, I did buy that in Native Plant Trust. And that one is really one of, I mean, you know, it's a long tubular flower. Then you have the cardinal flower. You have the Monarda didyma, which is a bee balm. They also love the jewelweed impatiens. You know, that one is an annual, and it has a long tubular shape and with the nectar in the bottom, so that it, you know, it has, the flower fits the beak of the hummingbird. And do you know what they like also? I've been planting red runner bean because I like the beans. They like those flowers. That is a vegetable. Now I'm going to call up my friend Freddie. She has an announcement. Thank you, Freddie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Freddie Gillespie, and I'm so excited about Giancarla's presentation to you today. And our announcement, my announcement is that we are coming live next week. Will be a new Facebook group. And you're going to get an email with a link to it after this presentation. I was one of the founding members of the Native Pollination Systems Task Force, which was the precursor to the Bumblebee Project. And it was in the Sudbury Valley area of 36 communities. And I left that to focus on being able to spread the word even further because, you know, we need to go statewide. And I see Paula here, she has one of these gardens. And the goal of this Facebook group, I know not everyone's on Facebook, but it's one of the best methods we have right now. Eventually, we hope to get a website and try to send out emails, but to do what Giancarla's done across the state. And there are multiple towns now that are starting to have these. He's focused on public display gardens as a teaching garden so people could see and then to see the, you know, what the plants look like so they might like them at home. And then we started collecting the seeds to do the winter sow. You saw the results of Giancarla's. There was a, last winter we had a winter sow in Carlisle. And then in 2020, I think it was, or 2019, in Southborough, we hosted our first winter sow. And we were the only ones who had done it. And this year, you couldn't find a weekend since, you know, January to now that didn't have it. It's a great way to get these plants out there for people to do at home. So anyhow, the goal of this Facebook group is to focus just on the Dr. Giger plants and the relationship with the wildlife using it and the at-risk species, as well as to share knowledge because we're all learning as we go. You know, Giancarla will find something out and share it with me. I can share it with Paula, who can share it with someone else, but also maybe start digging into some of these design questions because we started out with the big pollination preservation gardens, right? But what do you do in your own backyard? We're going to start working on that. I want to say, I met Dr. Giger in 2015. I invited him to Breakneck Hill Conservation Land, and he adopted it as his first research site in the state. So we've been working with him before there was a list. And now that we have the list, he said he created the list after doing surveys and research, and he wasn't sure, you know, if you plant it, they should come, but, you know, until you planted it, how do you know? I'd spent 5 years looking for Bombus fervidus, which we knew was on the Breakneck Hill because he had grad students doing grid search. And I looked, you know, walking everywhere. I'd seen it maybe 5 times, and then we thought in 2019 we'd lost the population forever. We put that garden in, and I was inside the garden, and Bombus fervidus flew right over my shoulder and landed on a steeple bush at my knee. And it was like the most exciting thing, like when Giancarla said how excited you get. And this species, which is on the verge of being locally extinct, shows up, and then our population, that whole summer, it's been nonstop. I mean, it's not that popular, I mean, that often, but we saw it nonstop all season on the plants we planted. That's so exciting. So, okay, before I just also want to say I'm working with, because they're here in the audience, 4 of the students from Dr. Giger who are going to help me, are helping me with this website. So I just want to say a shout out to Brent, Sean, Najee, and Anna, who I believe are here watching. So, you know, we're having a really good information that we're going to provide here, and it's going to be done a little different than most Facebook groups where we'll have photo albums. So Giancarla's garden, you'll be able to see it from start to where it is today, and if something new happens. But we have gardens in Newton. I had someone from Pittsfield. That's the far corner of Massachusetts, right? Hopefully they'll have a garden, you know, all across the state, and it only happens by sharing the message. So I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about Giancarla's presentation today and the Middlesex counties hosting this. So was that for,
So a person wanted to know if you could put some content with like the project site for some people who want to see.
Sure. The Bumblebee Project website has tons of information, so it's probably already there. And what we're trying to do is get it beyond that, and also more, Facebook is current, right? So if I go home today and I see something, I can post it today. We can post activities all across the state, whereas the Bumblebee Project is focused on the 36 towns in the Suwatsko watershed. So, but thank you. I don't want to let people ask Giancarla questions.
Question from the audience? Did you have, oh, sorry, okay, here.
I was curious how hard it is to identify these different invasive bees.
Okay, what you need to do, you see a bee on a flower, you take a short video with your phone. Then you go to the app, it's called the Beecology app. So Dr. Digia has his own website, the Beecology. There is an app, it's not a phone app, it's a web app, so you don't have to download it. So you follow, and then he asks you, what is the color of the abdomen? So bumblebees are black and yellow, right? But in the abdomen, they have stripes. So is it mostly yellow, half black? Is it mostly black? So you follow that. So you look at your video, you take a still shot of the video and you say, okay, there is only one stripe of yellow in the abdomen. Then they ask you, now look at the thorax, the middle part section of the body, right? Is a thorax yellow with a black spot? Is a thorax yellow with some fuzzy gray? No, so it guides you. And then look at the head. What color is the head? So then at the end, it gives you the answer. You found Bombus impatiens. That is a common bumble. And then it asks you, now take a screenshot of the flower. What flower is it? What is a bee doing? Is it collecting pollen, collecting nectar? So, and then the beautiful thing is that the doctor will review all things that the citizen scientists are submitting, and he will correct you. Say, either he agrees. I mean, if he agrees, he will say nothing. But if he says, no, it's not that, it's Griseocolis, or some other, Bimaculatus. So then you will see that it changes when you go back after a while to the post that you the observation that you submitted, then you know that now that was not correct. Yeah, so it takes a while to get used, but when you see Fervidus is so easy because it's mostly yellow in the abdomen, and in the thorax, when you see it from the back, it's yellow with a straight black stripe across. So you cannot mistake that. Another question? Okay, so I think we're done. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. I felt very supportive.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to end the presentation now.
Well, I'm sure we